Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files is daily conversations to inform and educate, not just to entertain. I come prepared, and let the discussion just unfold naturally with people worth hearing about topics worth exploring. If it matters to your body, your freedom, or your future, we talk about it here on this show. Each day, we talk to authors and documentary filmmakers and independent thinkers whose work challenges mainstream messaging. We cover a wide range of topics from government, politics, and history to food, fitness, and farming to vaccines, health, and health policy to astronomy, pets, and travel. We have something here for everyone. We have conversations every week with authors who write about faith and biblical principles. My goal is to introduce you to topics that you've never heard of before, or topics you always wanted to explore but you didn't know where to start. Let our authors show you the way. Join me every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time at the Tenpenny Files to hear from voices who've often been ignored, silenced, or censored, but truly have something important to say. But before we begin this episode today, let me invite all of you to become a Tenpenny Prime member. Prime members receive exclusive content, a white paper, a recorded presentation, and an Ask the Expert masterclass at the end of the month. And every month that we do these master classes, I think it's the best one yet until we do the next one, that I try to find the very best people to come and answer your questions. We're exploring the human body because you only get one of these ever. And so we're going through all the different organ systems and teaching you a little bit more about them so you know how to better take care of this one body that God gave you at the point of conception and you have until the day you die. So join us at primemembership.drtenpenny.com, primemembership.drtenpenny.com to learn more and hopefully join and support our work. So now with that, let's get started. Today's conversation is with an author, artist, farmer, and former radio broadcast personality with a proud veteran of the United States Navy, Thomas E. Caldwell, with his book, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory, a story of overcoming a secret tribunal slander, perjury, and falsification of evidence to expose an intricate conspiracy within the nation's capital. Now, for those of you that have been following me here for a while, you know that we talk to 5 different authors a week, which means I have to review 5 different books every single week, which is like I don't really read. I've learned how to read fast. So I've learned how to read faster. And occasionally a book comes across that is so compelling. I do more than skim it, and I have a method for going through these books. And this is one of those books. I read the entire thing. It just sucks you in and has an incredible story. Tom has just told an incredible story that we'll talk a little bit more about this here today. So, Tom, welcome to the Tenpenny Files, and thank you for joining me. Thank you so much.
Dr. Sherry, it is a pleasure to be with you today.
You know, your story truly is one of the most shocking, unique stories about the whole January 6th escapade, but also the wrongful persecution, the dirty tricks by the government, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the withholding your prescription medications to cause you to have seizures. I mean, the persecutions for an accusation just went on and on. Can you share with us to start the conversation some of what makes your experience so frightening?
Well, sure. Um, One of the things that people need to know is most of what you've been told about January 6th just doesn't ring true for those of us who have had to suffer the slings and arrows and worse of the Biden administration. So January 6th, why are we still talking about it? Because this was a time when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the rights of man were thrown out. Now, my wife and I did go to January 6th. We went there just to say goodbye to the president. Apparently, he had lost the election. I'm an old guy. I was 66 when this all happened. Sometimes the guy I vote for wins, and sometimes he doesn't. But Sharon and I, my darling wife, we had never been to a Trump rally. We thought this might be a pretty cool thing to do. Washington, D.C. is the city of my birth. We live on a small generational farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and we're an hour and a half away. We thought, well, let's go and say goodbye to the president. So we did. Our experience, especially down on the ellipse, which is right across from the White House, the southern end of the White House, it was a love fest. There were hundreds of thousands of people there, all happy, singing patriotic songs and what we now call classic rock. The president said, "Hey, let's go down to the Capitol and peacefully let our voices be heard." Most people don't know that the Honorable Mayor Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., had issued a lot of permits for conservative and Christian speakers to speak on the grounds of the Capitol that day. This was not a surge of a mob. A lot of people were going there to hear people like Dr. Simone Gold, for example, speaking on temporary stages that were set up there on the grounds. So we went there. Sharon and I went down. It was so bitterly cold, Dr. Sherry, that day, so bitterly cold. I'm a disabled veteran. That stumping down Constitution Avenue was the longest mile I've ever taken, just pounded along with my cane. We got down to a place called the Peace Fountain, with a Peace Monument. It's a dry fountain in the middle of the winter. We were about 3 football fields away from the Capitol. That's where we spent most of the day. We took so many pictures and videos of lovely people that we saw. And you know what? There wasn't one bit of violence in any of that. Now, imagine our surprise after we went home. 2 weeks ticked by, and then in the early morning darkness of the 19th of January, an FBI SWAT team with an armored vehicle and at least 2 dozen body armor clad thugs with M4 automatic rifles descend on our farm and scream for me to come out with the searchlights blasting in my face. You figure if they wanted to talk to me, they could have just knocked on the door. But instead, they were making a statement of terror. And they pulled me across our lawn, chained me up, double chains, handcuffs in the front. Those handcuffs were affixed to a heavy waist chain around my waist, and I was shoved face down on the hood of a government car. And doctor, that's when I learned what true terror is. I asked people, do you like scary movies? What if you're in one? So I looked back on the porch that I had exited just a few moments ago, and there was my wife standing there in naught but a nightshirt in the glare of these lights with these monsters screaming at her. And I didn't understand. She didn't understand exactly what they wanted, but she was in full compliance. And that's when I saw what I called the devil's fireflies. They were the laser pointers of these automatic rifles dancing across her face and her chest. And I thought, rightly so, she was a finger twitch away from death. And that's when I called out, Abba, Father, please don't let them murder my wife. Please don't let them kill my wife. I'm sorry. All these years later, I still get very upset about that. But our Father heard and he answered. And that was probably the first time in my adult life that I ever actually called out to our Heavenly Father. The FBI slammed me into a vehicle. I didn't know for the longest time if Sharon was even still alive. I also committed what they often call on TV the unpardonable sin of actually talking to the feds without a lawyer present. Oh, I asked for one, but that wasn't going to happen. And doctor, I didn't have anything to hide. I didn't do anything wrong. And in the 3 hour, some would call Gestapo interrogation, I'll just call it an interview, it was very clear that they knew that I hadn't done anything wrong. Sharon and I have the most exhaustive pictorial history of our day. I'm not saying that some people didn't do some funky things on January 6th. I'm saying we didn't, and the government knew. And they had access to all these phones, the phone information, all the pictures that we had taken. And yet, during that interview, they said things to me like, I guess you're sorry you voted for Trump now, huh? Is there any question about what January 6th was all about, Doc?
Yeah, since you never went to the Capitol, or you never went into the Capitol,
Correct.
sat outside on a fountain area. Like you said, after your long walk, you just wanted to find a place to sit. So you sat outside, you were talking to people, singing to people, laughing. You never committed any crime. You never were part of a group. You didn't plan any violence. And since the government knew you were innocent, why did they, and you're a retired veteran, why did they target you?
A lot of people have asked that, and we don't know for certain. It was clear when they were talking to me that yes, they knew that I was innocent, but they hadn't done any research on me at all. They didn't know that I was a veteran, didn't know I was a disabled veteran doctor. They didn't even know that I used to work for the FBI.
Wow.
A simple search of their employment records would have helped them with that. But no, I think that some of the agents that were involved in this takedown were doing this because they thought it was career enhancing. The directive was coming down from the DOJ headquarters, the Attorney General. FBI is a subset of the DOJ, but there's so many different ways that our case, my wife Sharon's and mine, is different. For example, Sharon and I worked together all day on January 6th, but they arrested me, but never arrested her. Again, it goes to what you were asking about targeting, and I think I'm going to get there in just a minute. But in their press releases, the government told the whole world that I was the mastermind of January 6th. Didn't go in, didn't do anything wrong, but why let the facts get in the way of a good fairy tale? And they threw me in prison. That boy, there's a lot to talk about there, and you hit on some of it at the very beginning, but they put us through the ringer. I was locked up, I was tortured, and I don't use that word lightly. I wrote this book that you talked about, and I'm so pleased and proud that you felt it was compelling enough to have me on your program, let alone read the whole thing. It was important for me to put down in writing an indisputable record of the attack of the federal government against at least one U.S. citizen. I bring the receipts. I've got, as you know, about 24 pages of endnotes. I would like somebody to try to fact check me. I'm an intelligence officer. I think I know how to pull things together. But not only was that a major difference, but I would later be subjected to a 10 and a half week long jury trial in Washington, D.C., where there was no chance of getting a fair trial at all. And even after that, Sharon and I had to fight for 3 more years to get some kind of modicum of freedom back, some semblance of a peaceful life like the one that we had originally known.
You spent in your book, in your book, The Mouths of the Wicked, boy, which is such an apt title after everything that you went through. You speak frankly about solitary confinement and what they did to you. What were some of the conditions like, and how did you maintain your resolve during that time? As I was reading, we spoke about this briefly before we started the conversation. As I'm reading this, the thoughts that kept going through my mind were, this is an American jail, they call a prison, and this is the torture stuff they were doing to an accused person that wasn't even convicted. And it sounded like a deep underground prison somewhere in the Middle East of what was happening to you and others that were in there. Tell us a little bit about that mistreatment and how did you maintain your resolve?
I was woefully uninformed about what goes on in the jails and the prisons in our country, and I think I'm not alone in that. Maybe many of your viewers don't have any idea. I was thrust into solitary confinement, which is supposed to be some sort of punishment, but I was slammed into that pretty early on in my time. Everything was taken away from me. Of course, I had a burlap blend, short sleeve jumpsuit. I was thrown into a 6 by 10 concrete box, solid concrete walls, and a solid steel door on one end, and a continuous flow of ice cold air blowing on me 100% of the time. Uh, they did a lot. They were all in on this idea that I was the bad guy. So it seems like they really were also all in on trying to get me to admit to something I didn't do. And they pulled out the jams, I'll tell you. Yes, they immediately cut off all access to any kind of medical care, including the prescription drugs. I always say that, as a disabled vet who's held together by screws and rods and his arm is reattached with a bolt and all that kind of stuff, I'm dependent upon prescription meds, lotions, potions, and notions just to keep going. And somehow along the line, when I first got there, of course, they ask you all these things. So they knew what denial of these things was going to do to me. And during that time in there, they pumped in all kinds of horrible sounds. I should tell your viewers that I always cringe when I see these commercials on TV where they say, tap into these sounds. They help you disconnect your brain. They are the same sounds that they're pumping through. Those, along with static sounds like from a radio, almost like you hear on Paranormal Caught on Camera or whatever, where you've got these voices down inside. And so they're psychologically trying to attack you. Flashing light torture, denial of anything that is food, as I have come to understand the meaning of the word, dirty water to drink at the sink, that was it. And when that didn't get it done, when I wouldn't, just say whatever they wanted, yeah, they beat me and worse. And then they finally turned out the lights. Dr. Sherry, you know what it's like when people are held in solitary in utter darkness. And the Mandela Act that most countries on this planet have signed on to said, this is the ultimate of torture. This is illegal. This is inhuman. This is a violation of human rights. You had a very great conversation recently with Dr. Patrick Porter, I believe it was, and he was talking about the brain tap. Let me tell you, this was the next level of what we've heard the CIA had done. MK Ultra, messing with people's minds. They want to break you down and remove that cognitive clarity, like Dr. Porter was talking about. They want you to question everything. And when you're in a situation like that, Doc, you really can't think straight. One of the ways that I maintained was on the precious phone calls that I could have with Sharon. They wouldn't let me out. I mean, I was locked down 24 hours a day, but they would occasionally let a little short phone cord come through with a dirty old handset. And Sharon said we lived for those phone calls. She was going through a hell of her own. I was going through a hell that was designed to break me down, even at the cellular level. And she was my rock during all of this. I had asked for a Bible multiple times from the library. Of course, there's no library visits for me in solitary confinement. I think perhaps the people in there knew the power of the word and they didn't want me to get my hands on it. But Sharon, my darling Sharon, she's the hero in all of this because she kept me focused. I always say, if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, make a Christian woman your wife.
Hmm.
Because she told me, she says, look, you got to remember what it says in Philippians 4, 6, and 7. You've got to approach the Lord with thanksgiving and present your request to him. And then the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. What that means is, hey, how about acknowledging what God has already done for you? And I talked about it in the book. I'm there on the floor. I'm freezing. I'm sick. I'm breaking apart. My skin is separating, and I'm saying, how can I find something to be thankful for? And then I said, Lord, thank you that they haven't beaten the tar out of me yet today, but the day ain't over yet. And thank you for my darling Sharon and all the years that we had together. Doctor, I believed, and Sharon believed many times, that we would never see each other again this side of heaven. But even though I was ready to give up, not give in to the bad guys, but just give it up and say, Lord, take me, it was not his plan to do that. And the worst of it was when they held me down on the ground with my legs apart and they kicked me repeatedly in the man zone and they mocked my faith and said, where is your Christ?
Hmm.
Is there any doubt in anyone's mind that we're in a spiritual war?
Yeah, I mean, that was the one part of the book that it just made me sick to my stomach. And I was just cringing over, what they did and what they said to you, that they would kick you repeatedly in the groin as hard as they could, and while they held you down. And then you had, trauma after that for quite a while, and they refused to get you medical care. And, it was
True.
just such a vicious thing. What do you think would have happened, Tom, if if they could have broken you? If you would have said, okay, I'm just going to say, all right, whatever you said I did it. And just to conform so that the beatings would stop. What do you think would have happened then?
Well, I don't think I would have gone home. I think I would have eventually gone right back into prison and probably died there. For them, it would have been a lot easier because they wouldn't have had to go through so many of these trials. They could have just said, hey, look, just point the finger at all these people, and there you go. And we're going to take them down. I would have been their star witness. That's what they would have wanted from me, but I wasn't going to go there. And most people don't understand that when you take a plea deal of any kind, you have to stand there and swear to the Lord that what you're about to say is true. So they took a lot from me, and they took a lot of my dignity and my innocence and all of that, but they weren't going to let me blaspheme like that. I mean, they weren't going to make me stand there and swear falsely in front of God. And I suppose to some people, that's not a big deal. And I think that people at the DOJ have a real knack of making people very, very afraid. There are quite a few people charged with J6 things who I am sure were absolutely innocent. That's just my gut feeling. And yet, they took plea deals not because they're not religious, not because they're someone's stooge, but because when you're facing maybe 20 years and never seeing your children grow up, saying that you did something that causes you to be locked up for maybe 3 or 4 doesn't look like a bad deal. And
Mm.
that's why a lot of people did that, I'm sure.
Well, as an end time, as a believer, many of us are looking at the state of the world around us, and I've had many pastors and many authors, maybe many Christian authors on this show. In fact, before I started this particular show, I did a show twice a week. It was called Happy Hour with Dr. T. So I talked to pastors and Christian writers, and most everyone that I talk to and my friends all say we're looking at end times of what's coming, and that the persecution of Christians it's happening all around the world, but it's about to come to America. And your testimony of faith is so strong. And I think that above and all, and we're going to talk more about your book and the content of it, but I really feel like you withstood and said, no, I'm not going to lie before my God, is such a testimony of strength, and can give the many more people the testimony of saying, don't, no matter what's happening to you physically, don't lie before your God. And I think that it's a message, a take home, one of the take home message that I took away from reading your book.
Thank you so much because all in all, the book, it's not a woe is me.
No.
It documents. It's not even a revenge kind of book because that's in the hands of the Lord. There hasn't been any accountability yet. Why should I be holding my breath for it to happen? But it's a glorification of God because, as you know, by going through it, there were so many miracles that happened, so many things that are impossible to explain away as pure happenstance. Our God is a God of details. There is no happenstance. There's no coincidence. And if I were not sure of that, I am now. Here I am. I'm the great grandson of a circuit riding Methodist preacher from the desert Southwest in the days of Pancho Villa. And my biblical education was not what it should be. Well, you know what? Those days are over because my spiritual eyes are open. And if I can tell some people, if I can inspire, if I can enrage, engage, and encourage with this book about what a loving God can do and say, look, Sharon and I, we're the evidence of this. There is no reason why we should have beaten the entire United States government. If I can inspire somebody in that way to say, you know what? I've got a tough situation too, but this clown Tom, he had a really bad situation. If God will take care of him, maybe there's hope for me too. And there is. And that's the message.
Is that what inspired you to take your whole story public?
That was a big part of it. It really was. And Sharon and I, we prayed about it. I wrote this thing as it happened, as it was unfolding, not in the clear light of a beautiful sunset after we were set free. That's why I'm pouring out so much emotion. I was writing this stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning as we kept getting hit left and right, exactly what happened. So I can say, let me take you by the hand. Let me show you what this was like and what the government does to people. But also let me show you what a loving God can do too. And as I said, she and I prayed about this. We said, if we go public with this, there's a real chance they're going to come down on us again. And to a very small degree, the media is already doing that. They're saying, oh, this guy, he's a felon, he's a liar, he's this, he's that. But we said, it's worth it. It's worth it to tell the story. And we prayed about it, and God didn't say no. So here we are. And we thought it was important. So boldly, you got to go forward. We're called to witness. Some of us get to witness in person at a pulpit, and some of us get to witness through the written word. And so that's what we've done. And since we've put the book out, we've gotten many opportunities to speak, for example, like right now with you, to your audience nationwide and worldwide. This is a blessing.
Well, it certainly is. And it certainly is. And you're such a point of resilience for that, not only during it, but now afterwards. So I want you to hold that thought right there. Now is a good time to hear from our sponsor for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the 10 Penny Files on iHeartRadio Network daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also listen anywhere in the world if you go to AmericaOutloud.news and turn on their media player, and you can listen from your phone, from your laptop, from your computer, from anywhere in the world. If you've missed any of these great conversations, and we've had a lot of them here on this show, you can find the 10 Penny Files on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and many other platforms, including my platform at dr10penny.com, where you can go to that site and click on the podcast tab. A window will drop down where it says all podcasts. You can scroll back through there and find out what you've missed if you haven't been following us. We also post on dr10penny.substack.com. We post things on X, Instagram, and Rumble. My handle on those places is at Busy Dr. T, Busy DRT. We hope that you'll come and like us and join us and help our platforms grow. Because there's so many great books and documentaries with so little time to read and watch in our busy lives, where this show is meant to jumpstart your interest and maximize your time. Sit tight. We're going to have a great word from our sponsors here. And if they so motivate you, go to our sponsors and support them, because that helps to support us. Sit tight. We will be right back with more from Tom Caldwell in his book, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Sit tight. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use, and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water, because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to dr10penny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today, our conversation is with Tom Caldwell and his book, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Let me tell you a little bit more about today's guest. Tom Caldwell is a decorated, retired Navy lieutenant commander who served for nearly 2 decades, principally within the naval's intelligence community. His position gave him a unique perspective on the global and domestic threats of our nation. After a successful military career, Tom and his lovely wife, Sharon, launched a software systems development company that served multiple high-level federal government agencies. It was here that he first observed questionable practices and motivations from an insider's perspective. A devout Christian, Tom and Sharon today live on a small farm in the Virginia Shenandoah Valley. Tom, welcome so much back to the show.
Thanks, Doc.
You know, you and your wife Sharon are this. Your wife Sharon is a central feature in this entire story, and how your faith in Christ and her belief in you and her struggles, or to get you out of that horrible situation, was just key to the story. And you've been called as a genuine Christian who has walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and what they tortured you through. And I'm sure that Sharon, in her own way, was being tortured mentally and physically to get you out and to find you justice. How did this experience test your marriage? And what role did she play in that seek for justice for you?
She was the foundation through all of this. As I was suffering in prison, and she could hear it in my voice as I was getting sicker and sicker on those phone calls, people saying, "Well, so how did you keep from getting pneumonia?" I don't know that I didn't, to tell you the truth. And Sharon will be the first one to tell you that. She knew I was suffering, but she was suffering too. She knew that I hadn't done anything. And she was trying so hard just to find an attorney who would deign to defend a January 6er. There weren't very many in the country at those times. It was like we had some kind of a fungus or something like that. Forget justice for all. It just wasn't happening. And so she was busy pounding on doors trying to find somebody. And we did finally find someone, she did, who needed a six-figure retainer. I don't know how many people have that laying around. But she was busy selling all of our farm equipment to raise the money for an attorney. It's kind of funny to call this place that we live on now a farm, since there's no animals and there's no farm equipment, but maybe someday. But she was really going through it. Now, one time a friend came over to pray with her and said, "Hey, would you like me to help you take down the Christmas tree?" Because the Christmas tree was still up as of the 19th of January when they hauled me off. And Sharon said, "No, Tom and I put that tree up together. We're going to take it down together when he comes home."
Wow.
So she never gave up hope, even though things were really, really bad. And when they attacked us, even after the lawyer that she was able to find, and I should point out that's another one of the amazing miracles in this story, that the Lord sent us the right lawyer, a guy named David W. Fisher from a little place called Glen Burnie, Maryland. How about that? A real life David to fight the government Goliath. And she and he worked so hard, finally got me out. When I got home, I was in a wheelchair by the end of my time in that dumpy prison in Virginia. And she was nursing me back to health, and we were suffering all kinds of things. They canceled our credit cards, they canceled my Social Security, all of this stuff illegal, of course. The DOJ with a phone call does this stuff. Um, Canceled our auto insurance with good old USAA that just loves veterans. My military disability payments were stopped. My military medical benefits, and by extension hers too, were stopped, all on a whim, as the DOJ just wanted to keep ramping up the pressure. And again, there was a chance there for a plea deal. Sharon says, "I wouldn't let you take a plea deal. I don't care if we lose everything," which we almost did, "and we have to live in the back of a car," which thank God we didn't have to. "You're not going to take a plea deal ever. We're going to fight them hammer and tong all the way to the end." And I say, where do you find a woman like that? What it did to our marriage was this. I saw the resolve and the strength in this diminutive, beautiful girl that I knew was there maybe, but it was up front. And she was instrumental in forming our what turned out to be very successful legal defense and all of this stuff. She was amazing at every turn. And uh, at the end of all this, people say, "Well, have you been restored? Is there any action underway to restore you or any other January 6ers?" The answer is not in the way the world understands it. For us, our marriage is stronger than it's ever been, even though we've lost so much stuff. Sharon says stuff is stuff, but our love is stronger than it's ever been. And our faith in and our trust in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, is stronger than it could ever have been. Our feelings about our Christian faith and our knowledge about a loving Father is just unmatched. It's nothing that I could have ever understood before. But we have been through the fire, she and I together, and we stand together even now. And we're glad it's over, but we are never going to be the same.
You know, you go into great detail, really, really great detail about your trial. And you even have things in there like he said this and cross-examination this, and it went back and forth. And all I could see was the DOJ attorneys just as slithering lizard devils sitting there, talk. And your attorney was just so calm. And when it was his turn to talk, he just like slammed it all down. And they were just like evil, slithering, slimy devils, of what that whole thing was going on. When the trial was over, after you'd been through all of that, and after knowing what you'd been through, because I think if I remember right, you were actually in prison for 53 days,
Right.
unrelenting, and then you had a long time of wait until you got to the trial. And and then we went through like 10 weeks, I believe you said, of the trial.
Yes, ma'am.
When the verdicts were announced, how did you feel at that point?
I was really disappointed and really enraged. You talk about the prosecutors, and again, they knew that I was innocent. They suborned perjury from witnesses. FBI special agents are among those who lied on the witness stand. The the DOJ prosecutors, they fabricated false evidence. They politicked with the judge to keep actual exculpatory evidence, stuff that proved my innocence, away from the jury, and the judge agreed. When I was back in that prison, in that darkness, let me tell you what, Dr. Sherry, there's things that come out of the darkness. Your mind is looking for connections. The area that I was in the prison, the other inmates called it the haunted area of the prison. And I'll tell you what, there were some demonic things living in the walls there. You could say maybe it was some bad cheese I got in there or something. I was having some kind of hallucination, and I won't say no, but I will say I saw the demonic in there. And about the prosecutors, I saw the same kind of thing. I say, I looked into the eye of the demon in the dark, and I looked into the eye of the incorrigible and the demonic in that courtroom. It's almost like it's almost like looking into the eyes of a severed doll head that you find out in the woods at a shotgun shack. It looks sort of like it's human, but there's nothing there. There's nothing behind it. It's like a doll's eyes. It's like a shark's eyes. And when you look into them, nothing is looking back that is good. And I went to trial on five phony felonies, each carrying 20-year sentence. I was found not guilty outright of the three worst, including seditious conspiracy, which cut me to the quick, especially after a lifetime of service to our country. Um, you would think that I would be happy, but they still tacked me with two guilty verdicts that were absolutely ridiculous. It was Sharon, once again, who kept me from spinning off into the atmosphere. She said, "Don't you get it? You beat them. You won. If you had been found guilty of one of those conspiracy charges, it was three conspiracy charges that I was found not guilty of outright, even in a kangaroo court, the jury just couldn't go there. They were going to find everybody guilty of something, but not that." She said, "They would have dragged you away. I never would have seen you again. You won. This other stuff, we're going to beat it on appeal. We're going to keep on fighting no matter how long it takes." And until we actually got total freedom, it would be almost 3 full years after that victorious day in a kangaroo court in DC.
Well, you know, your Christian faith is so strong and woven through this entire story. And we won't tell the listeners what the very end of the story is because we want them to read the book. And a little bit of a cliffhanger, I will tell people, a little bit of a cliffhanger at the very end of the book that you have to go to read through everything that they went through. And as a story of inspiration, truly, inspiration of believing in God, believing in your relationship, believing in each other, and knowing that God was with you every step of the way, even in that horrible, awful dungeon that you've talked about. Tell the listener how you've managed to maintain and be so even-handed about everything that has happened to you?
Well, we've come from a time that was so dark. We dreamed of a day when we would have some kind of a normal life again. And it seemed like ignostatus, it just seemed like a wisp of light that would never happen. Every day there was another dirty trick from the government, even after we had gone through trial. Whenever you think that they can't do anything new that's horrible, they'll do it. They found a way. And we shouldn't be surprised. I spoke at the very end of the book, of course, as you know, that this was all part of a plan. There was a document that Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, declassified fairly recently called the Strategic Implementation Plan for Fighting Domestic Terrorism. The significance there is this is the first time, and I hope this is chilling for all of your viewers. It was a document which was for the very first time the roadmap for attacking American citizens as terrorists, to the exception of any foreigners. They said, these are the kinds of people we got to go after. COVID deniers, right? Religious zealots, people who are those life people, the ones that will protest outside of abortion clinics, the people that don't want children to have affirming surgeries, the people who complain about what the government is teaching their kids. The government knows best. All of these people were on a hit list, and it's laid out in that multi-page document. It was classified, now it's declassified, but boy, the mainstream media doesn't want you to see it. I wrote a couple of op-eds about this sort of thing, but you can imagine in the local DC area, the Post, the Star, none of these are going to publish that. Maybe I should send it to you and have you put it out as part of your newsletter, but part of your content, because the people who watch your program, they want to know. They're inquisitive, they're intelligent people, and they can understand this was an attack on all of us. And it was just a matter of time. President Reagan said, we're only a generation away from losing so much. And I'm here to tell you, truth and innocence meant nothing in the January 6th thing. I'm the perfect example of that. They knew I was innocent, but they did not care. They just kept doubling down, expecting me to fold up.
Well, Tom, I really, really seriously send those two articles to Diane, because we're always looking for writers, good writers, and you definitely, the full example of you being a good writer
Okay.
is this book, because it's written very compelling. It's like it was hard to put it down when she started, reading, and it just sort of sucked you in. That I read the entire book. It was really very good. So send us those. We'd be happy to share that information.
Well, I sure will, and I thank you. And I thank you for that ringing endorsement, because when I was putting this down, I didn't know if the FBI was ever going to come back and just take me away again in the middle of the night on some trumped up charge. So I wanted to get down every single step of the way. And the other thing, as you well know, is that I might be the only J6 defendant who has complete access to all of the government information, all of the fake evidence, all the evidence that was true, that was blocked from the jury, every single one of the transcripts of the trial. So when I went back and I was saying, this is the way that I remember it, it was great to be able to say, here's the footnote, here's exactly what it said. Yeah, I have a really good memory because I've had a lot of lonely nights, sitting there thinking about how could this possibly have happened? Did they really say this? And I will say one thing, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but there's outrage in here. There's some joy in here, but many people say, there's some laugh out loud stuff in here that you write down. How could you see the humor in that person or the silliness in that particular situation? And Sharon says, that's just the way you are. It's the way you deal with life. And in this case, it might be just a coping mechanism, and I'm glad for it.
If you had the opportunity to sit across a desk or across a table with President Biden after all this had happened, what would you say to him? Or what would the conversation sound like as a retired veteran who served the country for 20 years, and in the intelligence division? If you had the opportunity to speak directly to him, what would you say?
Well, first, let me see. I'm not sure he would really get what I'm talking about. But I
That's
would try to say to him, this was done in your name.
Yeah.
This was done on your watch, as they say. That Harry Truman used to have a sign on the desk that said, "The buck stops here." And one would think that the buck stopped with Joe Biden too. If I could really get his ear and say, these things were done under your watch, and people were doing these terrible things, what do you have to say about it? I would have to also say that I wouldn't be angry and yell at him and say, "How could you have done this?" Because he wasn't actually the one who turned the screw. He wasn't actually the one who swung the boot, but he probably should know. And I think maybe he doesn't really know the depth of the depravity that was going on. Most Americans don't even know. So it would not surprise me if somebody in the Oval Office didn't know. On the other hand, if I could talk to President Trump, I'd say, "Thank you for saving my life." Going back to Joe Biden, I would not be so angry and I wouldn't curse him or anything like that. Dr. Sherry, one of the things that I learned, it was the hardest thing. It was the hardest thing, considering what was done to me and what was done to Sharon, who I love so much, was forgiveness. God tells us how important that is. Jesus reminds us how important that is in the way we're taught to pray, right? Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass. Doesn't mean anything like simultaneously. It means in the same way. As I was forgiven earlier in my life, anything that I've done wrong, completely. It's not like Jesus said, yeah, you're forgiven, Tom, except that stuff you did between January of 76 and March of 76. It's going to take me a while to get over that." No, it's completely. So part of it was I had to dig the claws out of them so that I could go on, so that I could do whatever God has called Sharon and me to do in the time that we have. And the other part of it is forgiving doesn't let somebody off the hook. It's giving forward to God. God, you handle them. You do what you want. If they can be saved, that's great. And I'm moving on. Use me as you will. And as you probably know by now, Doc, we have gotten a chance to travel a little bit around the country now that I'm free and I don't have to ask the federal government for permission to leave my farm. Believe it or not, that was a real thing for several years. And we've gotten a chance to meet so many great people. Sharon and I were down in Sebring, Florida, just last week for the Highland County Republican Faith Coalition meeting down there and spoke to hundreds of really wonderful believers. And they too said, "Hey, this story has to be told, but moreover, it's important for you to tell it because you lived it." And some would think that writing the book was cathartic. No, it was painful.
Mm.
But speaking with people and seeing the light bulb come on and answering their questions in a Q&A and holding them and having them speak to me about things that they thought they would never know could happen in this country. Just say, "What you're doing is important." I don't know if it's important or not, but if somebody says it is, then maybe it is. And so we're just going to keep on doing it. We're just going to keep on talking to anybody who would like to hear. I did meet one J6er one time in Charleston, South Carolina, where we were able to speak at the Citadel, the military academy of the South. And he took me by the hand. I hope I don't turn into a blubbering mess right now, but he said, "Tom, you say things I can't say yet. I can't speak about the hurt. I can't speak about the way they destroyed my family and took my career from me and locked me away for nothing, for nothing." And there are a lot of people, Dr. Sherry, that did a lot more time in jail than I did, a lot more. And I don't know how they managed to do that, except that there are many that I've met who found the Lord there. And I think that was a big part of how they were able to survive. It was for me, knowing that a loving God knew what was going on. The title of the book, The Mouths of the Wicked, there was never any evidence against me. It was only stuff coming from the mouths of the wicked. And when I did finally get my hands on a Bible after all this created again, I let it fall open, as you know, to Psalm 109. And it spoke to me. The mouths of the wicked and the mouths of the deceitful are opened against me. They speak of me with a lying tongue. When I read that, I knew that the Lord knew what Sharon and I were going through and that we could win this thing and move into a brighter day.
And with that, we're going to have to close out today, Tom, because we're short on time. We could talk another couple of hours. I want everybody to get this book, This Mouths of the Wicked, a true story about January 6th by Tom Caldwell. So I want to thank you, Tom, so much for your graciousness. Thank you for being here. Thank you for writing that. I so am sorry of so much that you went through, but I've been a long believer that good things can come out of bad things, and your story is a certain testament for that. So with that, I want to thank all of our listeners who've been here with us today. An incredible story. You can find Tom's book if you go to bookstore.dr10penny.com, bookstore.dr10penny.com. That's where we have all of our authors' books, so you can get that. And I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close every one of my podcasts with, whether they are live or pre-recorded, which is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. Remember to lean into God and trust Him for everything. His timeline may not be your timeline, but He's always with you and He will never let you down. So we will see you here tomorrow or the next time on the 10 Penny Files. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.